Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a journey, not through time in the usual sense, but deep beneath the very ground where history sleeps. We're going to whisper our way through the Roman catacombs, those vast, silent cities built for the dead, a testament to life and belief in an age-long past. Imagine, if you will, the bustling, sun-drenched streets of ancient Rome, teeming with chariots and citizens, the Forum echoing with orators, the Colosseum roaring with crowds. Now, take a deep breath, close your eyes, and picture sinking, slowly, down, beneath all that noise and life, into a world of cool, damp earth where only silence reigns. It's a place where thousands, tens of thousands, perhaps even hundreds of thousands, found their final resting places, carved directly from the living rock. This isn't your average historical tour, though. This is the kind of history that wraps around you like a cool, damp blanket, the kind that lulls you into a contemplative state. We're talking about a kind of engineering marvel that makes you wonder just how much sheer human will and backbreaking labor went into creating something so immense, yet so hidden. You probably wouldn't survive a single shift down there back in the day, pushing through the dark, hacking away at volcanic rock with simple picks and shovels. The air thick with dust and the smell of freshly turned earth. No, you'd be utterly exhausted, probably covered in grit, and definitely not thinking about your next espresso. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It truly helps this little corner of the internet grow, and it lets me know these sleepy historical deep dives are finding their audience. And if you're feeling up to it, drop a comment below and let me know where you're listening from tonight, and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing at the mouth of a narrow, unassuming opening, almost hidden amidst overgrown ivy and ancient stones on the outskirts of what was once the sprawling city of Rome. The air here, even on a warm Roman afternoon, feels noticeably cooler, carrying a faint, earthy scent. As you step inside, the light from above quickly fades, swallowed by the encroaching darkness. A torch, perhaps held by an unseen guide, flickers ahead, casting dancing shadows that stretch and warp along rough-hewn walls. This is your first real encounter with the Roman catacombs. These vast, silent chambers of the departed, and the sheer scale of their construction immediately begins to impress itself upon you. The ground beneath your feet is uneven, a mix of compacted earth and small, loose stones. You're not walking on a paved road, but through a passage carved directly from the tuff, a relatively soft volcanic rock that underlies much of Rome. It's this geological characteristic, this unique property of the earth itself, that made the creation of such extensive underground cemeteries possible. Think about it if the ground had been hard granite or unstable clay. These intricate networks simply couldn't have existed. Tough is easy enough to excavate with simple tools, yet stable enough to hold its form, allowing for multi-tiered galleries and chambers without constant fear of collapse. It's almost as if nature itself conspired with Roman necessity to create these subterranean cities. As you move deeper, the passage narrows in places, forcing you to turn sideways, then widens into small, irregular chambers. The walls are not smooth, but bear the distinct marks of picks and shovels, silent testimony to the thousands upon thousands of hours of labor that went into their creation. You might notice small niches, almost like shelves, carved into the walls at varying heights. These are loculi, the primary form of burial within the catacombs. Each loculus, typically rectangular, was designed to hold one, sometimes two or even three bodies, placed in a shroud or a simple sarcophagus, and then sealed with tiles or a marble slab, often inscribed with the deceased's name and a simple epitaph. Imagine the sheer dedication required to carve out literally miles of these narrow shelves, each one a permanent home for someone's loved one. The initial purpose of these catacombs was straightforward burial. Roman law, for reasons of public health and superstition, generally prohibited burials within the city walls. This meant that vast cemeteries, both above ground and in some cases below, had to be established outside the city's boundaries, while cremation was a common practice for many Romans. Burial was also widespread, particularly among Christians and Jews, for whom bodily resurrection was a key belief. This religious distinction is crucial, as it largely explains why the catacombs, though not exclusively Christian, became so strongly associated with early Christian communities. For them, preserving the body for the afterlife was paramount, making underground burial an ideal solution. You find yourself in a wider area, perhaps a small chapel or a family crypt, known as a cubiculum, unlike the narrow corridors. These cubicula offer a sense of space, sometimes adorned with frescoes that, despite the centuries, retain faint traces of color. These aren't grand, monumental artworks like those found in Roman villas or temples, but rather humble, often symbolic representations. You might spot a dove, an anchor, or a fish. Simple symbols that, to the initiated, conveyed deep theological meaning. The very presence of art in these dark, confined spaces speaks volumes about the human desire to bring beauty and meaning, even to the realm of death. It also highlights a fascinating dichotomy, a practical, almost industrial approach to burial, combined with a profound spiritual and artistic expression. The sheer scale of these subterranean networks is truly staggering. Historians still debate whether the Roman catacombs represent a unified, centrally planned system or a collection of independently dug, though often interconnected, burial grounds. Regardless, what you're experiencing is just a tiny fraction of a vast, sprawling labyrinth that stretches for hundreds of kilometers beneath the modern city. To put it in perspective, imagine a subterranean highway system, but instead of cars, it's filled with the silent echoes of the past. Mile after mile of narrow passages and burial niches. The logistics of such an undertaking, the surveying, the excavation, the removal of thousands of tons of earth, the sheer organization of space for countless interments are almost incomprehensible. This was not a quick project. It was a continuous, evolving enterprise that spanned centuries. You learn that the primary excavators of these catacombs were often fossers, a specialized class of laborers, many of whom were Christian. These were not slaves, but skilled workers, often paid for their dangerous and demanding labor. Imagine the specific skill set required, not just brute strength, but an understanding of geology, a sense of direction in the perpetual darkness, and the ability to work in cramped, often poorly ventilated conditions. They were the unsung heroes of this silent empire, carving out new resting places with each swing of their picks. Their tools were basic picks, shovels, baskets for carrying away excavated material, and oil lamps for light. The excavated earth, known as pozzolana, was often hauled to the surface and used as a valuable building material, a sort of natural cement, creating a symbiotic relationship between death and construction. As you continue to wander, the feeling of claustrophobia might occasionally brush against you, but it's quickly replaced by a sense of awe at the immense human endeavor. The air remains cool, a constant temperature regardless of the season above ground, providing a natural form of preservation for the remains within. You pass by areas where the loculi are packed tightly, layer upon layer, indicating periods of high mortality or intense demand for burial space. Other sections might be less dense, suggesting a slower pace of interments. This ebb and flow of burial activity tells its own silent story of Rome's growth, its periods of prosperity and its times of hardship. The construction wasn't simply about digging tunnels. It involved a careful system of ventilation shafts, known as luminaria, which pierce the earth to the surface, providing fresh air and, crucially, shafts of light that occasionally illuminate a section of the catacomb, creating an almost ethereal glow. Without these shafts, the air would become stagnant and suffocating, making prolonged work impossible. These subtle architectural elements, though purely functional, add to the mystique of the catacombs, hinting at the ingenuity of their builders. The planning involved in ensuring structural integrity, proper air circulation, and efficient use of space speaks to a level of practical engineering that is often overlooked in favor of Rome's more famous above-ground achievements. You might stumble upon a small, alcove-like space, perhaps a loculus for a child, noticeably smaller than the others, a poignant reminder of the high infant mortality rates in ancient Rome. These tiny burial spots, nestled among those of adults, lend a somber intimacy to the vastness of the catacombs, humanizing the otherwise overwhelming scale of death. It's a quiet whisper of individual lives within the grand narrative of history. The very act of creating these individual spaces, even within such a massive communal cemetery, reflects the Roman respect for the individual and the desire to provide a distinct, if humble, final resting place. The initial motivation for these underground burials wasn't necessarily secrecy or persecution. Though those elements would become relevant later, it was primarily practicality and land scarcity. As Rome expanded, prime land outside the city walls became increasingly valuable. Burying bodies underground was an efficient use of space, allowing for dense populations of the dead without occupying vast tracts of agricultural land or prime building sites. This practical approach to funerary architecture highlights a core Roman characteristic: efficiency. They were masters of organization and problem solving, and the catacombs are a prime example of their ability to adapt and innovate to meet logistical challenges. Even in the context of death, as you conclude this first leg of your journey, you realize that what you've seen is merely the threshold, the true depths, the intricate layers of history, and the countless stories still lie ahead. You've only just begun to understand how these silent chambers were conceived and painstakingly brought into being. A subterranean echo of the vibrant city above. It's a place where the living literally walked among the dead, a constant reminder of the fragility of existence and the enduring human need to honor those who have passed on. You've dipped your toes into the vast, cool darkness, feeling the initial awe of the catacombs' existence. Now, let's peel back another layer of earth and descend deeper into the sheer physicality of their creation. We're talking about the methods and tools that brought these immense subterranean networks to life. A testament to Roman ingenuity and, frankly, an incredible amount of back-breaking labor. Imagine, for a moment, that you are one of the fossers, those skilled, specialized workers responsible for carving out these silent cities. The year is, say, 250 AD, and you've just been assigned a new section. Your day begins long before dawn. You're not reporting to a grand construction site with cranes and heavy machinery. Instead, you're gathering your simple, yet effective, toolkit. What do you have primarily? A pickaxe, not the modern, heavy steel kind, but one with a sharpened iron head and a sturdy wooden handle. This is your primary weapon against the earth. You also carry a spade or shovel, perhaps with a wider, flatter head for scooping loose dirt. For light, a small, open oil lamp, fueled by olive oil, casting a flickering, uncertain glow that barely pushes back the oppressive darkness. And for carrying away the excavated material, sturdy wicker baskets, perhaps even rudimentary wheelbarrows if the passage is wide enough. Forget about ventilation systems beyond the occasional air shaft. You're breathing the dust you create. As you descend into the existing network, the air grows cooler, heavier, and carries the distinct smell of damp earth and stale air. You might pass by newly sealed loculi, the scent of fresh mortar still lingering. Your task is to extend an existing gallery, or perhaps begin a new one from a central cubiculum. The first step is always to identify the ideal layer of tuff. While tuff is relatively soft, it's not uniform. Some layers are firmer, more stable, others looser. Prone to crumbling, an experienced fosser developed an almost instinctive feel for the right stratum. Understanding that structural integrity was paramount, you wouldn't want your hard work, or more importantly, the final resting places, to collapse with your pickaxe. You begin. The motion is rhythmic, almost meditative. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Each swing chips away at the volcanic rock, sending small fragments scattering. You aim for the natural grain of the tuff, leveraging its inherent weaknesses. It's not about brute force alone, it's about understanding the material. You're not digging a haphazard hole, you're creating a precise, rectangular tunnel, ideally about 0.8 to 1.2 meters wide. Just enough for two people to pass by each other, or for one person to comfortably push a basket. The height varies, but it's often designed to accommodate multiple tiers of loculi. Imagine doing this for hours, day in and day out, in dim light, with no mechanical assistance, as you excavate. The loosened pozzolana, that valuable sandy volcanic ash, accumulates around your feet. This isn't waste, it's a valuable byproduct. Other workers, perhaps younger apprentices or laborers with less experience, will follow behind you, diligently shoveling the pozzolana into the wicker baskets. These baskets, once full, are then hoisted or carried through the winding passages to the nearest luminarium, a vertical shaft that extends all the way to the surface. Think of these luminaria as the catacombs' lungs and arteries, providing crucial ventilation and a pathway for removing excavated material. The process of hauling hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands of baskets of pozzolana to the surface was an immense logistical challenge. Imagine human chains, passing baskets hand to hand up the shafts, or perhaps a simple pulley system if the shaft was particularly deep. The sheer volume of material removed from some of the larger catacombs is staggering. For example, some estimates suggest that the catacomb of Calixtus alone involved the excavation of hundreds of thousands of cubic meters of earth. To move that much material without machinery required an organized, continuous effort, a symphony of human labor orchestrated in the perpetual twilight. Once a section of the gallery, say 10 to 20 meters long, has been excavated, the next phase begins carving out the loculi. This requires a different kind of precision. You would mark out the rectangular shape of each burial niche on the wall, often stacking them 5 or 6 high. Depending on the height of the gallery, then, with smaller, more precise picks, you would meticulously hollow out each loculus, ensuring it was just large enough to comfortably accommodate a shrouded body. This wasn't a quick process. Each loculus had to be carefully shaped, its floor level, its sides smooth enough to receive the ceiling tiles or marble slab. It was delicate work, imbued with a quiet reverence, for these were to be the eternal resting places of individuals. The constant need for light was a persistent challenge. Your oil lamp provided a small pool of illumination, but the deeper you went, the more overwhelming the darkness became. Imagine working for hours with only that small, wavering light, your shadow dancing menacingly on the rough walls. Accidents, though rarely documented, must have been frequent. Falls, cuts from picks, perhaps even collapses into unstable sections. The air quality, despite the luminaria, would have been poor, thick with dust from excavation, and the faint, sweet smell of decay from older burials. This was not a glamorous job. It was a gritty, hazardous, and often solitary existence. Archaeologists still debate whether specialized teams focused solely on excavation, or if the fossers were multi-talented, handling both the initial digging and the carving of loculi. Regardless, the coordination of such a massive ongoing project points to a sophisticated level of organization. There would have been overseers, supervising teams, ensuring the galleries followed a planned path, and that new sections didn't accidentally intersect older ones unless intended. Imagine trying to navigate and plan a multi-level underground labyrinth without modern surveying equipment, relying largely on simple plumb lines, measuring rods, and an innate sense of direction. It's a marvel of ancient civil engineering, often overlooked because it's hidden from view, beyond the pickaxe and shovel. Other tools might have been employed, simple chisels and hammers for finer work on the loculi or for preparing surfaces for inscriptions. Perhaps rudimentary water levels to ensure tunnels maintained a consistent grade. Preventing water accumulation. The Romans were masters of hydraulics and construction, and even in these humble underground spaces, their practical expertise would have been applied. They understood the importance of drainage, even in burial chambers, to prevent water damage and maintain stable conditions. Consider the disposal of the tools themselves, as iron picks and shovels wore down or broke. They would have been discarded. Sometimes, these forgotten tools are found by modern archaeologists, lying exactly where they were left thousands of years ago. Silent echoes of the last swing of a pickaxe, the last scoop of a shovel. It's a poignant detail, a direct link across millennia to the hands that shaped these dark tunnels. You might even find traces of soot from the oil lamps on the ceilings, a permanent stain left by centuries of dim light. The construction of the catacombs wasn't a one-time event, it was a continuous process. Adapting to the growing needs of the community, new galleries would branch off existing ones, sometimes forming vast, complex networks. This organic growth meant that early sections might be simple and irregular, while later sections show a greater degree of planning and even a rudimentary grid system. It's almost like observing the geological strata of a city's development, but in reverse, from the inside out. This ongoing expansion meant that the fossers were constantly at work, carving new spaces, sealing old ones, and managing the delicate balance between reverence for the dead and the practicalities of a growing population. The damp, cool environment, while conducive to preservation, also meant that working conditions were far from comfortable. The air could be heavy, still, and carrying the faint, sweet scent of newly interred bodies. Despite the occasional luminarium, much of the work would have been conducted in semi-darkness, relying heavily on the flickering oil lamps. Imagine the psychological toll of spending your working life in such an environment, surrounded by the silent dead. It fostered a unique kind of community among the fossers, a shared experience of labor and solemnity that few others could truly understand. One peculiar, little-known detail about these excavations involves the occasional discovery of pre-existing structures or even older, shallower burials during the digging process. Sometimes, the Roman builders would encounter ancient wells, cisterns, or even Etruscan tombs from centuries earlier. When this happened, they typically either carefully avoided these obstacles, tunneling around them, or, if unavoidable, incorporated them into the catacomb structure, sealing them off respectfully. It's a subtle reminder that even ancient Rome was built upon the layers of even older history, and the catacombs, in their silent descent, sometimes unearthed these deeper echoes of the past. It's like finding a secret room behind a secret room, a history within a history, tucked away in the forgotten corners of the earth. As you emerge from this imagined shift, covered in dust, your muscles aching, you look back at the dark opening. You've helped carve another small piece of this vast underground world. It's a job that might seem grim, but for the Roman people, and particularly for the early Christians, It was a vital service, ensuring a dignified final resting place for their loved ones, a place that reflected their beliefs and hopes for the afterlife. The sheer scale of what was achieved with such basic tools and relentless human effort is truly astounding, a silent monument to the power of collective will. You've explored the raw, physical effort of digging the catacombs, the tools, the methods, the tireless work of the fossers. Now, let's widen our gaze and truly grasp the concept of a city below a city. Imagine the bustling, vibrant metropolis of ancient Rome above ground, a sprawling urban center home to over 1 million people at its peak. This wasn't just a collection of buildings, it was a complex organism, with its own infrastructure, its own social strata, its own rhythms of life. And beneath it, mirroring its complexity, grew an equally vast, silent realm, the necropolis, or city of the dead. This isn't just about a few scattered tombs. We're talking about an intricate, multi-layered underground landscape. Picture the roots of a giant, ancient tree, spreading out in every direction, intertwining and descending deep into the earth. That's a good analogy for the way the catacombs grew. They weren't centrally planned from the outset as one massive project, like a Roman aqueduct or a forum. Instead, they often began as smaller, independent burial plots, perhaps owned by wealthy families or religious confraternities. Over time, as the need for burial space grew, these individual sections expanded, merged, and interconnected, creating truly astonishing networks. The sheer density of these burials is what truly makes them a city. When you walk through a catacomb gallery, you're not seeing empty walls. You're surrounded by thousands upon thousands of loculi, those stacked shelves carved directly into the rock. Imagine a multi-story apartment building, but instead of apartments, each unit is a final resting place. And these aren't just a few floors. Some catacombs reach 5, even 7 levels deep, descending further and further into the earth, each level representing another generation, another wave of interments. The deeper you go, the older the burials generally are, a kind of chronological layering written into the very stone. This organic growth pattern, while efficient in some ways, also led to incredibly complex and often disorienting layouts. Without a comprehensive master plan, the passages can twist and turn unexpectedly, dead end, or suddenly open into a large cubiculum before resuming their meandering path. It's a true labyrinth, designed for the quiet passage of mourners and the efficient storage of the dead. Not for easy navigation by modern tourists. That's why, even today, entering some unexcavated sections without an expert guide would be an extremely dangerous undertaking. It's easy to get utterly lost in the silent maze. The population of this underground city was incredibly diverse, reflecting the varied demographics of ancient Rome itself. While the catacombs are famously associated with early Christians, they were also used by Jewish communities, and even some pagan families adopted the practice of underground burial, particularly those from the lower and middle classes who couldn't afford elaborate, above-ground mausoleums. This shared space for the dead, cutting across religious and social lines, albeit in distinct sections, offers a fascinating glimpse into the melting pot that was ancient Rome. You might find a Christian fresco depicting the Good Shepherd just around the corner from a Jewish inscription bearing a menorah, both communities seeking eternal rest beneath the same soil. The sheer numbers are difficult to comprehend, while exact figures are impossible to ascertain. It's estimated that hundreds of thousands, potentially even millions, of individuals found their final repose in Rome's catacombs over several centuries. Imagine the logistical challenge of simply managing the influx of bodies, identifying and preparing each loculus, and then sealing it. This required a constant, organized effort on the part of the religious communities and their dedicated staff of fossers and funerary workers. It was an industry of death, operating silently beneath the feet of the living The development of these underground cemeteries was also influenced by urban planning and land values. As Rome grew, land within and immediately outside the city walls became increasingly valuable for housing, agriculture, and public works. Burying the dead underground was a practical solution to this spatial constraint. It allowed for high-density burial without consuming precious surface land. This practical aspect underscores a key Roman characteristic: their pragmatic approach to problem solving, faced with a burgeoning population and limited space. They literally went underground. It's a clever, if somewhat morbid, example of urban planning. The catacombs also served as more than just burial grounds. For the early Christian community, particularly during periods of persecution, these hidden spaces offered a measure of privacy and security. While they were primarily cemeteries, they occasionally functioned as clandestine meeting places for worship, a safe haven where believers could gather without fear of immediate detection. You might imagine hushed voices, the flickering light of lamps illuminating faces as prayers were whispered and sacraments shared, all while the Roman authorities remained oblivious to the vibrant life thriving just beneath their feet. This dual function, burial and occasional refuge, adds another layer of historical significance to these silent tunnels. Historians still grapple with the exact extent to which the catacombs served as outright hiding places during intense persecutions, or if their primary role always remained sepulchral. It's likely a nuanced answer. While not designed as fortifications, their inherent secrecy and network of passages would have offered a temporary respite or a place for discreet gatherings when needed. It's a testament to the resilience of belief in the face of adversity, a story whispered by the damp earth and ancient bones. The constant maintenance of this underground city was another monumental task. Even after burials ceased in a particular section, the catacombs required ongoing care. The luminaria needed to be kept clear to ensure ventilation. The structural integrity of the tunnels had to be monitored, especially in areas prone to dampness or earth tremors. And, inevitably, some loculi would open due to the decomposition of ceiling materials, requiring resealing or, in later periods, the careful transfer of remains to ossuaries. This wasn't a bury them and forget them scenario. It was a long-term commitment to the departed. You can often see evidence of this ongoing maintenance. Sometimes, you'll notice sections of wall that have been reinforced with bricks or crude masonry, indicating repairs to prevent collapse. Other times, you'll spot areas where the original ceiling tiles of loculi have been replaced with newer, cruder materials, a clear sign of later intervention. These small details tell a story of a place that was actively managed and cared for over centuries, a silent collaboration between the living and the dead. The very air in this underground city has a unique quality. It's cool, constant, and strangely quiet, muffling the sounds of the world above. You might hear the faint drip of water, or the scuttling of some unseen creature, but mostly, it's a profound silence. This stillness is part of the catacombs' enduring power, a stark contrast to the clamor of ancient Rome. It's a place where time seems to slow down, where the weight of history presses gently upon you, inviting contemplation. As you wander through these endless passages, you might pass sections of wall where a large, shallow recess has been carved. These are often arcosolia, a more elaborate type of burial, typically for wealthier or more prominent individuals. An arcosolium consists of an arched recess over a flat tomb, providing a more distinguished burial space, sometimes adorned with more elaborate frescoes. These stand in contrast to the humble loculi, highlighting the social distinctions that persisted even in death. Though perhaps less pronounced than in above-ground cemeteries, this subterranean metropolis, while hidden, was deeply integrated into the spiritual and social fabric of Roman life. Particularly for the Christian and Jewish communities, it was where they laid their dead to rest, where they connected with their ancestors, and where their hopes for an afterlife were quietly affirmed. It wasn't just a place of sorrow, it was a place of remembrance, a sacred ground that affirmed continuity across generations. The sheer scale and complexity of this city below a city truly speak to the profound human need to honor the dead and create a lasting legacy. Even in the silent depths of the earth, you've descended into the silent corridors, felt the damp earth, and marveled at the sheer human effort that carved a city for the dead beneath Rome. But these aren't just dusty tunnels filled with bones. As you turn a corner, perhaps guided by a faint shaft of light from a luminarium above, your eyes adjust to the dimness, and you begin to notice something else, the subtle. Faded hues on the walls, the graceful lines of a figure, the quiet symbolism that hints at a deeper narrative. This is where we encounter the art and afterlife within the catacombs. Discovering the surprising beauty of the frescoes and the profound beliefs they reveal about Roman death and spirituality, unlike the grand, opulent mosaics and sculptures found in public Roman buildings or the villas of the wealthy. The art of the catacombs is, by necessity, simpler, more intimate, and deeply symbolic. These aren't works designed to impress or showcase imperial power. Instead, they are humble expressions of faith and hope, painted directly onto the rough, tough walls or on plaster applied to arcosolia, those arched burial recesses for more prominent individuals. The palette is often limited, favoring earth tones, reds, ochres, and blues derived from the natural pigments. The light, even when provided by modern illumination, still struggles to fully reveal their subtle charm, requiring you to lean in, to truly see many of these frescoes, particularly in the early Christian catacombs, depict scenes from the Old and New Testaments, but not always in the way you might expect. They are often concise, almost shorthand representations, focusing on moments of salvation, deliverance, or divine intervention. You might spot a depiction of Jonah and the whale, symbolizing resurrection and deliverance from death, or Daniel in the lion's den, representing divine protection. There's Noah's Ark, a universal symbol of salvation, or even the raising of Lazarus, a powerful testament to Christ's power over death. These weren't meant to be literal illustrations, but rather visual affirmations of hope for the departed and comfort for the grieving. Each image serves as a quiet prayer, a whispered promise of what is to come. Beyond biblical narratives, you'll also encounter a wealth of symbolic imagery. The fish ichthys, a well-known Christian symbol, is ubiquitous. Its Greek letters forming an acrostic for Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. The dove, often carrying an olive branch, represents peace and the soul's ascent to heaven. An anchor symbolizes hope and steadfastness in faith. The Good Shepherd, a gentle figure carrying a lost sheep on his shoulders, is a recurring motif, embodying Christ's compassion and care for his flock. These symbols, easily understood by the early Christian community, provided a visual language of faith, a shared understanding in a world where their beliefs were often misunderstood or even persecuted. It's easy to look at these simple paintings and dismiss them as primitive compared to the masterpieces of the Renaissance. But that would be a profound mistake. They possess a raw honesty, a directness that speaks volumes about the early believers' convictions. The very act of creating art in these dark, confined spaces, often by lamplight, speaks to an incredible dedication and spiritual fervor. Imagine the artists, perhaps themselves members of the Christian community, meticulously applying pigments to the damp walls, knowing that their work was not for public display, but for the quiet contemplation of fellow believers in the silent company of the dead. Art historians still debate the precise training and background of the artists who painted the catacomb frescoes. Were they skilled professional artisans who adapted their craft to Christian themes? Or were they primarily devoted amateurs working within the community? It's a fascinating question, as the stylistic variations suggest a range of skills and influences, from classical Roman naturalism to more abstract. Symbolic representations. What is clear is that they imbued their work with a profound sense of purpose. Using visual language to convey complex theological ideas in an accessible way, the frescoes often tell us about the daily lives and social structure of the early Christian community, not just their religious beliefs. You might see depictions of ordinary individuals praying, with hands outstretched in the orant praying pose. A common pose in ancient art, but here imbued with Christian meaning. Sometimes, the faces of the deceased themselves are depicted, providing us with a rare glimpse into the actual countenances of people who lived nearly 2 millennia ago. These portraits, while often stylized, offer a powerful connection to the individuals buried beneath your feet. A peculiar, perhaps even humorous, detail you might stumble upon is the occasional inclusion of non-religious or pagan elements. You might find decorative motifs that are purely Roman, like garlands, birds, or even mythical creatures, juxtaposed with Christian symbols. This isn't necessarily a sign of syncretism, but rather a reflection of the cultural environment in which these early Christians lived. They were Romans, after all, and their art naturally incorporated familiar decorative styles and motifs, even as they adapted them to express their new faith. It's a subtle reminder that early Christianity didn't emerge in a vacuum, but grew within the rich tapestry of Roman society. Beyond the frescoes, inscriptions on the ceiling slabs of the loculi also offer profound insights into the beliefs and lives of the deceased. While many are simple, stating only the name and age, others include epithets that express hope for eternal life, or commend the deceased to God. You might read phrases like in pace and peace, or dormit in Christo, sleeps in Christ, conveying a sense of serene anticipation rather than despair. These short, poignant messages are like tiny windows into the hearts and minds of those who lived and died in ancient Rome. The very act of burial in the catacombs, in contrast to the common Roman practice of cremation, speaks volumes about the early Christian belief in the resurrection of the body. For them, the physical body was not merely a temporary vessel to be consumed by flames, but an integral part of the individual, awaiting reunification with the soul on the day of judgment. This belief shaped their funerary practices, emphasizing the preservation of the physical form, even if only in the humble confines of an underground niche. As you wander, consider the silence that envelops these artworks. There are no crowds, no booming voices, only the quiet reverence of contemplation. This environment itself shapes the experience of the art. It's not designed for quick viewing, but for a slow, meditative engagement. The dim light, the cool air, the awareness of the countless dead around you all contribute to an atmosphere that encourages introspection and a deeper connection to the spiritual themes presented on the walls. It's a silent sermon, preached through paint and stone. The fact that this art has survived for so long, often hidden and undisturbed for centuries, is itself a minor miracle. The stable, cool, and relatively dry conditions within the tough rock helped preserve the pigments, though exposure to light and air over time has caused some fading. When you see a vibrant flash of red or blue in a particularly well-preserved section, it feels like a revelation, a sudden burst of color from 2 millennia ago, reaching out to you from the past. This underground artistic legacy provides an invaluable source for understanding early Christianity. Before the widespread adoption of Christianity as the official religion of the Roman Empire, much of its material culture was necessarily discreet. The catacombs, with their hidden chapels and symbolic art, offer some of the earliest and most direct evidence of Christian iconography and theological concepts. They are a treasure trove for historians and theologians alike, providing tangible links to a formative period of Western civilization. One subtle yet powerful aspect of catacomb art is its message of equality in death. While some burials, like the Arcosolia, were slightly more elaborate. The vast majority of loculi were uniform: in death, rich and poor, slave and free, were laid side by side in similar earthen shelves, while life above ground was characterized by strict social hierarchies. The catacombs often presented a more egalitarian vision, particularly for the Christian community where all were considered equal in the eyes of God. It's a powerful statement, silently conveyed by the very architecture of their final resting places. As you gaze at these ancient images, let your mind drift to the people who created them, the people who were buried here, and the people who visited them, seeking solace and hope in the quiet darkness. The art of the catacombs isn't just about aesthetics, it's about belief, remembrance, and the enduring human quest to find meaning in the face of mortality. It's a silent, whispered story of faith, painted on the very fabric of eternity. You've explored the art and spiritual beliefs etched into the catacomb walls. Now, let's consider a darker, yet profoundly significant chapter in their long history, their role during periods of persecution and refuge, while primarily conceived as burial grounds. The catacombs occasionally served a dual purpose, transforming from silent cemeteries into clandestine meeting places, offering a precarious sanctuary for early Christians facing the wrath of the Roman state. To understand this, you must first grasp the context of Roman persecution. For much of its early existence, Christianity was viewed with suspicion by Roman authorities. Christians refused to participate in the imperial cult, which involved offering sacrifices to the Roman emperors and traditional gods. This refusal was seen as disloyalty to the state. Bordering on sedition, rumors also circulated about Christian practices, misunderstanding their communal meals, the Eucharist, as cannibalism, or their gatherings as secret plots. This volatile atmosphere meant that Christians often lived under a cloud of potential legal trouble, their very existence as a distinct religious group a source of unease for the established order. Persecutions were not constant or empire-wide at first. They tended to be localized and sporadic, often flaring up under particular emperors or governors who saw Christians as a threat, or in response to popular unrest. However, there were intense, empire-wide persecutions, most notably under Emperor Decius in the mid-3rd century and Emperor Diocletian at the turn of the 4th century. During these brutal periods, simply being identified as a Christian could lead to arrest, torture, and execution. Churches were destroyed, scriptures burned, and believers were forced to renounce their faith or face dire consequences. It's during these times of intense pressure that the catacombs took on a new, urgent significance. Their inherent nature is hidden. Extensive underground networks made them ideal places for discreet gatherings. Imagine the scenario: you are a Christian in Rome, living in fear. Public worship is impossible. Meeting in homes carries too much risk. Where do you go to gather with fellow believers? To hear scripture, to share communion, to strengthen your resolve. The very places where your martyred brethren were laid to rest, beneath the gaze of the authorities, offered a desperate solution. So, you would descend into the cool, dark passages. The air, though stale, felt safer. The labyrinthine nature of the catacombs, so disorienting to the uninitiated, became a shield. You would navigate by memory or by subtle markers known only to your community, perhaps a particular inscription or a unique bend in the tunnel. In a small cubiculum, perhaps one adorned with the faded frescoes we discussed earlier, a group would gather. The flickering oil lamps would cast long, dancing shadows, emphasizing the secrecy of the moment. Prayers would be whispered, hymns softly sung, and the Eucharist shared in hushed tones, all while the vibrant, dangerous city roared on above them. These gatherings were likely not daily occurrences, nor were the catacombs used as permanent residences or hideouts in the manner of a fortified bunker. Their primary function always remained burial, However, for specific, critical moments, an urgent worship service, a secret meeting to discuss community matters, or even as a temporary refuge for those directly fleeing arrest, their hidden nature was invaluable. Think of it as an emergency shelter, utilized only when the storm above became too fierce. Archaeological evidence and historical texts offer compelling, though sometimes debated, insights into the extent of these clandestine uses, while the sheer number of burial niches attest to their primary function. The existence of larger cubicula, sometimes equipped with simple benches or altars, strongly suggests their use for communal gatherings. Furthermore, the presence of martyrs' tombs within the catacombs themselves would have made these spaces particularly sacred and meaningful for worship. To pray at the tomb of a saint who had died for their faith would have been an incredibly powerful experience. Reinforcing their own commitment, the memory of the martyrs was deeply venerated by early Christians. Their tombs within the catacombs became focal points for pilgrimage and devotion. This veneration further cemented the catacombs' importance, even during periods of relative peace. Christians would visit these underground shrines to honor the dead, seek intercession, and draw strength from the examples of those who had endured persecution. This practice continued for centuries. Even after Christianity became the official religion of the empire, a subtle yet compelling piece of evidence for this dual use lies in the very nature of Roman law regarding burial. Roman law, while often harsh on Christians, generally respected funerary rites. Cemeteries, even Christian ones, were typically considered protected spaces. This legal loophole may have inadvertently provided a degree of immunity for the catacombs, allowing them to exist and expand even when Christian practices were outlawed elsewhere. It's a peculiar irony the very legal framework designed to control urban spaces inadvertently provided a protective cover for the burgeoning underground faith. Imagine the atmosphere in those clandestine gatherings. The fear, certainly, but also the palpable sense of community, of shared faith, of resilience. You are literally surrounded by the silent witnesses of those who came before you. Their final resting places a constant reminder of the ultimate sacrifice many had made for their beliefs. This would have instilled a profound sense of purpose and courage. The catacombs were not just places to bury the dead, they were places where the living found strength in their communion with the departed, where the line between this world and the next felt particularly thin. One fascinating, if somewhat grim, aspect of the persecutions was the desecration of Christian tombs by Roman authorities in an attempt to suppress the faith. While these acts were meant to terrorize, they often had the opposite effect, hardening the resolve of believers and further solidifying the catacombs as sacred ground. The idea that even in death, Christians were subject to harassment only served to strengthen their internal bonds and their sense of distinct identity. The Catacomb of Calixtus, for example, is particularly significant in this context. It became the official cemetery of the Church of Rome in the 3rd century and housed the tombs of many popes and martyrs. This made it a primary site for pilgrimage and, during persecutions, a potential target, yet its extensive network and multiple entrances would have made it difficult for authorities to completely control or monitor all activity within its depths. It was a complex game of cat and mouse played in the dark. This period of clandestine use also fostered a strong sense of internal solidarity within the early Christian community. Shared danger often forges unbreakable bonds. The catacombs became a tangible symbol of their resilience, a hidden testament to a faith that refused to be extinguished. When you walk through these tunnels today, you are not just walking through ancient graves, you are tracing the footsteps of those who bravely practiced their faith in the shadows, defying an empire. The use of the catacombs as places of refuge underscores the resourcefulness of the early Christian community. They adapted to their circumstances, utilizing existing infrastructure for new purposes, transforming places of death into spaces of life and worship. This adaptability was crucial to their survival and eventual triumph over persecution. It's a powerful narrative of human spirit and the enduring strength of faith in the face of overwhelming odds. So, as you step out of the imagined darkness of a clandestine meeting, leaving behind the echoes of whispered prayers and the silent company of the martyrs, you carry with you a deeper appreciation for the multifaceted role of the catacombs. They are not merely cold, damp tombs, but places steeped in the drama of early Christian history, silent witnesses to both profound sorrow and incredible courage. You've explored the quiet drama of the catacombs as places of refuge and remembrance. Now, let's broaden our perspective and consider how the concept of these subterranean cemeteries wasn't confined solely to the Eternal City. The idea of the catacomb, this unique form of underground burial, didn't just stay within Rome's city limits, it spread beyond Rome's walls, influencing burial practices in other parts of the vast Roman Empire and even inspiring similar constructions in later eras. Rome, being the capital and a center of innovation, often served as a blueprint for its sprawling empire as Christianity spread throughout the Roman world, particularly in the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD. So too did the need for distinct burial grounds that reflected Christian beliefs. Remember, cremation was the dominant funerary practice for pagans. But for Christians and Jews, bodily interment was paramount due to their beliefs in resurrection. This created a specific demand for burial space, and the Roman catacomb model offered a practical and secure solution, especially in areas with suitable geology. So, where else do we find evidence of catacomb-like structures? One of the most prominent examples is in Naples, Italy. The catacombs of San Gennaro and San Godioso, for instance, are incredibly extensive, rivaling some of Rome's own. These Neapolitan catacombs, also carved into volcanic tuff, developed along similar lines, serving as burial places for early Christian communities and venerating martyrs. Walking through them, you'd experience a similar sense of cool, damp quietness, the same stacked loculi, and even some impressive frescoes. Though with their own distinct regional artistic flair, it's almost like a franchise model, but for cemeteries, spreading a successful concept from the central office outwards. Another significant example exists on the island of Sicily, particularly in the city of Syracuse. The catacombs of San Giovanni, carved beneath an ancient church, are quite impressive. They demonstrate that even in the far-flung corners of the empire, where local traditions might have differed, the utility and religious significance of underground burial held sway. This diffusion wasn't just about architectural mimicry. It was about the spread of a particular set of funerary customs intertwined with religious identity. Beyond Italy, you can find less extensive, but still significant examples in North Africa, particularly around ancient Carthage. Archaeological digs have uncovered Christian hypogea underground burial chambers that share many characteristics with the Roman catacombs, though often on a smaller scale. These sites, located in what is now Tunisia, underscore the widespread adoption of Christian burial practices across diverse geographical regions within the empire. The very presence of such structures in these distant provinces speaks volumes about the interconnectedness of the Roman world, where ideas, people, and practices flowed relatively freely. What allowed this concept to spread? Firstly, the universal need for burial space, especially outside city limits, was a constant. Secondly, the geological conditions in certain regions, particularly those with soft, workable rock like tuff or limestone, were conducive to such excavation. You can't just dig catacombs anywhere. You need the right kind of earth. Thirdly, and most importantly, the expanding network of Christian communities across the empire provided the social and organizational structure necessary to undertake such massive projects. It wasn't just random digging, it was communal effort. Driven by shared faith, scholars still debate the exact channels through which the Roman catacomb model spread. Was it primarily through direct emulation by visiting religious leaders, Or did local communities independently arrive at similar solutions, given shared needs and geological conditions? It's likely a combination of both. As the church grew and organized, there would have been a natural flow of ideas and best practices from the ecclesiastical center in Rome to its provincial offshoots. However, local ingenuity and adaptation would also have played a significant role. The funerary inscriptions and artworks found in these provincial catacombs often reflect local variations while maintaining core Christian symbols. You might see influences from local artistic traditions, blending with the established Roman Christian iconography. This blend creates a fascinating mosaic of early Christian culture across the empire. Demonstrating unity in faith but diversity in expression, it's like listening to the same song performed by different orchestras. The melody is recognizable, but the interpretation has its own unique flavor. Beyond the Roman Empire itself, the influence of the catacomb concept can be seen in later periods in different cultures, while not directly linked to Roman catacombs. The famous Catacombs of Paris, built much later in the 18th century, though primarily ossuaries for consolidating bones from overflowing cemeteries, echo the idea of a vast underground city of the dead. Even the relatively modern practice of creating underground crypts or mausoleums in some cultures carries a faint echo of the ancient catacomb, a recognition of the efficient and symbolic use of subterranean space for the departed. This diffusion of burial practices highlights a fascinating aspect of ancient history: how practical solutions, driven by deep-seated beliefs, could travel across vast distances. The logistical challenges of creating these underground spaces, the excavation, the ventilation, the disposal of spoil were overcome not just in Rome, but in numerous other locations, demonstrating a shared architectural and engineering knowledge within the Roman sphere of influence. When you stand in a catacomb in Naples or Syracuse, you're not just experiencing a local phenomenon, you're connecting to a wider network of ancient human endeavor, a testament to the universal human need to ritualize death and provide a lasting resting place for loved ones. The silence in these provincial catacombs is the same as in Rome. The cool air carries the same faint, earthy scent, and the rows of loculi tell the same story of lives lived and mourned. One intriguing, if somewhat macabre, detail about these spread-out catacombs is how they sometimes served as unwitting time capsules, preserving elements of local culture that might otherwise have been lost, because they were hidden and often forgotten for centuries. Their contents, from pottery shards to personal ornaments buried with the dead, remained undisturbed, offering archaeologists unique insights into provincial Roman life. Distinct from the heavily researched capital, it's like finding a series of forgotten attics, each holding unique treasures from a specific place and time. The very notion of catacomb as an underground burial site became almost synonymous with early Christian cemeteries precisely because of the pervasive influence of the Roman examples, even if local communities developed similar structures independently. The sheer scale and prominence of the Roman catacombs, particularly those associated with popes and martyrs, solidified their iconic status and provided a model that was widely understood and emulated. So, as you step out of the shadowed depths and back into the sunlight, you carry with you not just the image of Rome's subterranean world, but also a sense of its echoes across the vast and varied landscape of the Roman Empire. The catacombs were a unique Roman innovation, born of necessity and belief, that quietly, persistently, shaped the landscape of death for centuries, far beyond the city from which they originated. You've explored the reach of the catacomb concept across the Roman Empire. Now, let's fast forward through centuries of neglect and re-enter these silent realms at a different point in time when they were lost and rediscovered. Imagine these vast underground networks, once bustling with quiet activity, slowly slipping into oblivion, becoming forgotten beneath layers of time, earth, and urban sprawl, only to be dramatically brought back to light by intrepid explorers and dedicated archaeologists centuries later. after the official recognition of Christianity by Emperor Constantine in the 4th century, and especially after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. The importance and use of the catacombs gradually declined. Over time, as Rome itself suffered invasions and its population dwindled, maintaining these vast underground cemeteries became less of a priority. Above-ground churches and basilicas, built over the tombs of martyrs, became the new focal points of worship and burial. Many relics were translated and moved from the catacombs to these more accessible churches. This shift meant that the catacombs, once essential, slowly faded from active use and, eventually, from common memory. By the early Middle Ages, many entrances to the catacombs became overgrown, buried by landslides, or simply forgotten as the city above changed. The subterranean passages, once pathways for pilgrims and mourners, became dark, silent voids, known only perhaps to local farmers whose fields lay above them, or to occasional curious wanderers who stumbled upon a hidden opening. For nearly 1,000 years, from roughly the 6th or 7th century until the 16th century, the vast majority of Rome's catacombs lay lost, hidden beneath the accumulated debris of centuries. Waiting, imagine the eerie quiet that settled over them. The flickering oil lamps of the Fossers and early Christians were replaced by absolute darkness. The sounds of prayer and hushed conversation gave way to the drip of water, the scuttling of unseen creatures, and the profound stillness of undisturbed earth. The frescoes slowly faded, the inscriptions became grimy, and the very air grew heavy with the dust of ages. It's a stark contrast to their earlier vitality, a testament to how quickly human creations can be reclaimed by nature and time. The rediscovery of the catacombs was not a single event, but a gradual process, often driven by accident or a renewed intellectual curiosity about Rome's classical and early Christian past. A pivotal moment, often cited as the rediscovery, occurred on May 31st, 1578. A group of workmen digging for pozzolana, that same volcanic ash used to make Roman concrete in a vineyard on the Via Salaria, just outside Rome, accidentally broke into an ancient underground cemetery. Imagine their surprise, perhaps even terror, as their shovels suddenly gave way, revealing a dark, silent void. What they found was not just a hole, but an entire network of passages, adorned with frescoes and lined with countless burials, a place clearly not of their time. This was a startling revelation, as the existence of such extensive underground Christian cemeteries was largely unknown to scholars and the general public of the Renaissance. It ignited a wave of excitement and scholarly interest. It was like finding an entire lost city, but underground. Following this initial breakthrough, a new era of exploration began. One of the most significant figures in this rediscovery was Antonio Bosio, a Maltese antiquarian often called the Columbus of the Catacombs. For over 30 years, from the late 16th to the early 17th century, Bosio dedicated his life to systematically exploring, mapping, and documenting the Roman catacombs. He would spend weeks, even months, underground, navigating the dangerous labyrinths by torchlight, sketching inscriptions, copying frescoes, and painstakingly trying to piece together the layout of these vast subterranean networks. Bosio's work was incredibly dangerous. The air quality could be poor, passages could be unstable, and getting lost was a constant threat. He often wrote of the profound silence, broken only by the echo of his own footsteps and the drip of water. His monumental work, Roma Soterranea Subterranean Rome, published posthumously in 1667, became the definitive guide to the catacombs for centuries. It brought the hidden world of early Christian Rome to the attention of scholars and eventually the wider public, changing the understanding of early Christian history and art. There's a subtle academic debate about whether the catacombs were ever truly lost to everyone, or if local communities, particularly those living near the traditional burial sites, retained some oral traditions or limited knowledge of their existence. While it's clear they fell out of widespread public and ecclesiastical memory, the degree of total oblivion is a nuanced point. However, for the purposes of major scholarship and general awareness, their rediscovery in the 16th century was certainly a monumental event. The rediscovery wasn't just about academic curiosity, it also fueled religious devotion, as the tombs of martyrs and early popes were identified. The catacombs once again became sites of pilgrimage, drawing devout Christians from across Europe. This led to a new wave of interest in early Christian relics and a desire to connect with the roots of the faith. The damp, dark passages, once forgotten, became sacred ground once more. Of course, this period of rediscovery wasn't always gentle. Early explorers and even later excavators, while driven by genuine curiosity, sometimes caused damage to the fragile ancient structures and frescoes. Artifacts were removed, sometimes without proper documentation, and the very act of bringing air and light into previously sealed areas could accelerate decay. It's a classic tension between discovery and preservation, a challenge that continues to this day. One peculiar detail often associated with the rediscovery phase is the phenomenon of relic hunting. With the newfound access to thousands of burials, there was an intense desire to identify and venerate the remains of martyrs. This sometimes led to the removal of bones, often without definitive proof of martyrdom, to be enshrined in churches across Europe, while driven by genuine piety. This practice highlights the historical context of the time and the fervent belief in the power of relics. It's a slightly morbid, but entirely human response to connecting with the past. The reemergence of the catacombs profoundly impacted the understanding of early Christian art and architecture. Prior to their systematic exploration, much of what was known about early Christian visual culture came from later, more formalized contexts. The catacombs offered a direct, unvarnished look at the earliest expressions of Christian faith through art, influencing subsequent generations of religious art and scholarly interpretation. They provided concrete evidence that challenged existing notions of Christian origins. As you conclude this journey through their rediscovery, imagine the silent anticipation of those thousands of years of darkness. Then, picture the sudden rush of light, the astonished gasps of the workmen, and the subsequent meticulous, often dangerous, work of the antiquarians. The catacombs, once lost to time, now stand as powerful reminders that even the most buried histories can eventually resurface, offering profound insights into our shared past. You've witnessed the catacombs' long slumber and dramatic reawakening. Now, let's delve into one of the more macabre, yet entirely necessary aspects of their long history: the role of the bone collectors. This isn't a tale of ghouls or grave robbers, but of the systematic, often grim, work of organizing and consolidating remains within the catacombs, a practice that evolved over centuries and speaks volumes about changing attitudes towards the dead and the efficient use of sacred space. As the catacombs expanded and were used continuously for centuries, space, even underground, eventually became finite. While the fossors diligently carved new loculi, there came a point where existing ones, particularly older ones, needed to be managed. This is where the concept of secondary burials and ossuaries comes into play. When a loculus was opened, perhaps after several decades or even a century, the body within would have largely decomposed, leaving behind bones. These bones were often carefully collected and then relocated to communal ossuaries, designated chambers or pits within the catacombs specifically designed for the organized storage of skeletal remains. Imagine this process. You are a bone collector, perhaps in the early medieval period, long after the catacombs have ceased to be primary burial sites but are still revered. You descend into a dusty, quiet gallery with a long stick or a specialized tool. You carefully unseal an old loculus, the mortar crumbling with a soft hiss. Inside, you find the remnants of a human life bones. Perhaps a few fragments of cloth or personal effects that escape decay with a quiet reverence. You gather these bones, placing them into a designated container. It's not a desecration, it's a practical act of reverence. Making space for new interments or simply tidying the sacred space. This practice wasn't unique to the Roman catacombs. It was common in many ancient and medieval cemeteries around the world. Land was precious, and the dead often outnumbered the living in terms of required space. Consolidating remains into ossuaries allowed cemeteries to be reused, maximizing efficiency in the context of the catacombs. It meant that while thousands upon thousands of individuals were buried, the actual amount of space consumed could be managed over time. The most famous examples of mass bone collections are not necessarily within the Roman catacombs themselves, but rather in places like the Paris catacombs built much later to address overflowing cemeteries, where bones are artfully arranged into walls. However, within the Roman catacombs, you can still find evidence of these practices in the form of bone piles in certain chambers, or niches containing neatly stacked skulls and long bones. These are the silent archives of a long-past population. Testament to the pragmatic, yet respectful, approach to human remains. Historians still debate the specific social and religious protocols surrounding the disturbance and reinterment of older remains within the early Christian catacombs. While the practice clearly existed, the exact rituals and timing are not always explicitly documented. However, it's generally understood that it was done with reverence, as these were still considered the remains of fellow believers, often awaiting resurrection. It wasn't a casual discarding, but a careful consolidation. This practice also sheds light on the evolving relationship between the living and the dead. For early Christians, the catacombs were places of active veneration, especially for martyrs, as centuries passed, and new spiritual centers emerged above ground. The direct, individual connection to every buried soul in the catacombs might have faded, replaced by a more communal sense of the holy ground beneath. The bone collectors, in a way, were the quiet facilitators of this ongoing relationship, curating the silent population of the past, a slightly humorous, though probably unintentional, detail you might notice in some catacombs is the occasional mix of bones from different individuals in an ossuary, while the goal was generally organized collection. The sheer volume of remains and the passage of time meant that perfect individual separation wasn't always feasible or deemed necessary. It's a subtle reminder of the messy reality of death and decomposition. Even in carefully managed spaces, you might find a femur from one person resting next to a skull from another, a silent, intertwined assembly. The bone collectors were often part of the same funerary infrastructure as the fossers, albeit at a later stage of the process. They were the silent custodians of the long departed, ensuring that the catacombs continued to serve their purpose. Even as their capacity was tested, their work was essential for the long-term viability of these massive burial complexes. Without them, the catacombs would have quickly become completely full, preventing new burials when you encounter these bone collections, particularly in the later, more organized ossuaries. It can be a deeply unsettling experience to see so many human remains stripped of their individual identity and reduced to mere anatomical components. Is a stark confrontation with mortality. Yet, it also speaks to a cultural acceptance of death that is perhaps less prevalent in modern societies. For the people of ancient and medieval Rome, bones were not just gruesome relics, they were the physical proof of lives lived, a tangible connection to the ancestors, and a quiet promise of future resurrection. This consolidation practice also helped to prevent the disturbance or accidental scattering of remains over time, by moving bones into dedicated, often sealed, ossuaries. They were protected from the elements, from curious animals, and from later human activity. It was a form of long-term preservation, ensuring that the physical evidence of past populations remained intact. Even if individual identities were largely lost in the communal piles, the vastness of these bone collections underscores the incredible population density of ancient Rome and the sheer number of people who lived and died within its sphere of influence. Each bone represents a life, a story, a family, a set of hopes and fears when gathered together. They become a silent, overwhelming testament to the scale of human existence and its inevitable end. It's a humbling thought, making you feel very small and very temporary in the grand scheme of history, as you conclude your contemplation of the bone collector's silent work. You gain a deeper understanding of the catacombs as living, evolving spaces, adapting to the needs of communities across centuries. They are not static monuments, but dynamic archives of human life and death, constantly curated even in their deepest, darkest chambers. You've explored the silent labor of the bone collectors and the practicalities of managing the vast numbers of the departed. Now, let's bring our journey into the present. Considering the delicate balance between allowing people to experience these unique historical sites and the crucial task of ensuring their long-term survival. We're talking about the challenges of tourism and preservation within the Roman catacombs today. When the catacombs were rediscovered, they ignited a wave of fascination, and for centuries, they have drawn scholars, pilgrims, and curious visitors. Today, several of Rome's major catacombs, such as the catacombs of Calixtus, Domitilla, Priscilla, and San Sebastiano, are open to the public. You, as a visitor, can walk through these ancient passages, descend into cubicula, and gaze upon the laculi and frescoes that have endured for nearly 2 millennia. It's an unparalleled opportunity to connect directly with the past, to feel the cool air, and to absorb the profound silence of these sacred spaces. However, opening these fragile historical sites to thousands, sometimes millions, of visitors each year presents immense challenges. The very act of human presence introduces elements that can accelerate decay. Moisture, for example, is a constant enemy. The natural humidity of the underground environment, combined with the breath and perspiration of numerous visitors, can lead to increased condensation. This moisture encourages the growth of mold and mildew, which can irreversibly damage delicate frescoes and inscriptions. It's a subtle but relentless attack, slowly eroding the very history you've come to witness. Then there's the issue of light. While modern catacombs are illuminated for visitors, prolonged exposure to artificial light, especially certain wavelengths, can cause pigments in frescoes to fade and even accelerate the deterioration of organic materials. Conservationists carefully manage lighting levels, often using low-intensity LED lights that are less damaging, and typically keeping them on only when groups are passing through. It's a constant balancing act, enough light for you to see, but not so much that it harms the art. The sheer physical presence of people also takes a toll. Dust and particles carried in on clothing and shoes can accumulate, settling on fragile surfaces, accidental brushes against walls, even just the vibrations from footsteps, can cause micro damage over time. It's not malicious intent, but the unavoidable consequence of countless interactions with an ancient, delicate environment. Think of it as a slow, cumulative erosion, like water wearing away stone. But driven by human visitation, this is where the dedicated work of conservationists and archaeologists comes in. Their role is paramount in protecting these invaluable sites for future generations. They employ a range of sophisticated techniques, from environmental monitoring systems that track temperature and humidity, to delicate cleaning processes that remove centuries of grime without damaging the underlying art. They might reinforce unstable sections of tunnels, carefully repairing ancient masonry, or resealing disturbed loculi to maintain the integrity of the structures. Conservation efforts in the catacombs frequently involve heated academic debates regarding the best approaches to restoration versus preservation. For instance, should frescoes be restored to their presumed original vibrancy, or merely preserved in their current faded state to maintain historical authenticity? These discussions highlight the complexity of managing such ancient and delicate historical sites, where every decision has long-term consequences for the integrity of the past, a slightly amusing, yet often frustrating. Detail for guides is dealing with visitors who ignore instructions, despite pleas to avoid touching walls, to stay on marked paths, and to refrain from flash photography. Some tourists inevitably stray. It's a constant reminder of the human element in preservation, where the best intentions of experts can be undermined by a few careless actions. You might hear a guide gently, but firmly. Remind someone not to lean on a 1700-year-old wall, a polite plea to respect antiquity. The challenge isn't just internal to the catacombs, it also involves managing the surrounding environment. Urban development, changes in water tables, and even modern pollution can impact the stability and atmospheric conditions underground. Protecting the catacombs requires a holistic approach, considering the interaction between the subterranean structures and the world above. Beyond physical preservation, there's also the crucial task of interpreting these sites for visitors. Guides are not just escorts, they are storytellers. Educators who bring the history of the catacombs to life. They explain the symbols, narrate the lives of the early Christians, and contextualize the persecutions and the periods of rediscovery. Without this human connection, the catacombs might just be dark tunnels. With it, they become vibrant, echoing chambers of history. This interpretive work is itself a form of preservation, ensuring that the stories and significance of the catacombs are not lost. Even as their physical structures age, the revenue generated from tourism plays a vital role in funding these extensive preservation efforts. The entrance fees you pay contribute directly to the research, conservation, and ongoing maintenance of the catacombs. So, in a way, your very presence, managed carefully, helps to ensure these sites will remain accessible and preserved for generations to come. It's a virtuous cycle. Visitation enables preservation, which in turn allows for continued visitation. The future of the catacombs lies in finding an even more sustainable balance. This might involve new technologies for environmental control, more refined conservation techniques, and innovative ways to engage visitors virtually, perhaps reducing the physical impact on the most fragile sections. The ultimate goal is to allow the maximum number of people to experience these profound spaces while minimizing any negative effects. It's a silent vigil, where modern science and ancient history collaborate to keep the past alive. As you conclude your tour of the catacombs, you walk out into the bright Roman sun, perhaps blinking against the sudden light. You've seen not just ancient tombs, but a living historical monument, constantly under the care of dedicated individuals who fight a tireless battle against time, decay, and the very human presence that seeks to experience its wonders. It's a complex, ongoing saga of preservation, ensuring that these silent underground cities continue to whisper their stories for centuries yet to come. You've journeyed through the creation, purpose, art, struggles, and modern preservation of the Roman catacombs. Now, as our time together in these silent depths draws to a close, let's take a moment for reflection, to truly grasp the echoes of eternity that resonate from these ancient underground cities. These are not just historical sites, they are profound testaments to the human condition, to our universal grappling with mortality, faith, and memory. As you stand, perhaps for the last time, in the cool, still air of a catacomb gallery, imagine the countless individuals who passed through these very passages over the centuries. You've walked the same paths as early Christians whispering prayers, as Roman families bidding farewell to loved ones, as pilgrims seeking the solace of martyrs' tombs, and as intrepid explorers rediscovering a lost world. Each step you take is a connection across millennia, a silent conversation with generations long past. The enduring legacy of the Roman catacombs lies in their quiet testimony. They bear witness to the profound human need to ritualize death, to honor the departed, and to find meaning in the face of the unknown. In an age before modern medicine and extensive public health, death was an ever-present reality. The catacombs provided a structured, sacred response to this fundamental aspect of life, offering dignity and hope even in the shadow of loss. Think about the sheer scale of the human belief system that fueled their creation. These vast networks were not built by dictate but by community, by collective faith. The thousands of locally, the humble frescoes, the very act of carving into the earth, all speak to a deep-seated conviction in an afterlife. A hope that transcended the physical boundaries of existence. This enduring hope, etched into the very rock, is perhaps the loudest echo in these silent chambers. The catacombs also stand as a powerful reminder of the resilience of faith, born from necessity, expanded by devotion, and sometimes used as a clandestine refuge during periods of intense persecution. They embody the strength of early Christian communities in the face of imperial power and societal suspicion. Believers found solace and continuity in these hidden spaces, proving that ideas and beliefs, even when suppressed, can thrive in the most unlikely of environments. It's a compelling narrative of survival against overwhelming odds, a profound, yet sometimes overlooked lesson from the catacombs is their egalitarian nature. While some arcosolia provided slightly more prominent burials, the vast majority of loculi were simple, uniform shelves in death. The social distinctions of Roman society were often blurred. Rich and poor, slave and free, lay side by side, united in their final resting place and in their shared faith. This silent equality in death offers a powerful counterpoint to the rigid hierarchies of the living world above. Historians still ponder the subtle ways in which the early Christian emphasis on underground burial might have subtly influenced later Western funerary practices, even after above-ground cemeteries became common. While direct causal links are hard to prove, the catacombs undeniably cemented the idea of the grave as a permanent, hallowed resting place. Distinct from transient pyres, one of the beautiful ironies of the catacombs is that places built for the dead continue to teach the living. They are invaluable archives, offering tangible insights into early Christian art, epigraphy, social customs, and theological concepts that would otherwise be lost to time. Every inscription, every faded fresco, every carefully carved niche contributes to our understanding of a pivotal period in human history. They are silent professors, teaching us about the origins of a global faith and the everyday lives of its early adherents. The persistent coolness and dampness of the catacombs, which might feel oppressive at first, is also a testament to their enduring power. This stable environment, far removed from the fluctuations of the surface world, creates a sense of timelessness when you are deep within them. The centuries seem to melt away, and the past feels almost within reach, a breath away, a whispered thought. It's a unique sensory experience that reinforces the profound connection to antiquity. And then there's the silence, a deep, pervasive silence that absorbs sound and invites introspection. In our noisy, fast-paced modern world, such profound quiet is a rare gift. The catacombs offer a space for contemplation, for quiet reflection on the brevity of life and the enduring mysteries that lie beyond it. It's a silence that isn't empty, but rather filled with the echoes of countless lives. A peaceful hum of eternity as you prepare to leave. Consider the delicate balance we discussed, the ongoing dance between allowing access and ensuring preservation. The fact that these sites exist today, open for you to visit, is a testament to the dedication of generations of scholars, conservators, and religious institutions. They are the modern custodians of these ancient legacies, ensuring that the whispers of the past continue to be heard. The Roman catacombs are more than just archaeological sites. They are profound symbols. They represent the human spirit's ability to create, to believe, to endure, yes, and to remember. Even in the most challenging of circumstances, they are a timeless journey into the heart of faith and the enduring human quest for meaning beyond the veil of death. Their silent walls continue to speak volumes, reminding us of the fragility of our existence, the strength of our convictions, and the quiet dignity that accompanies the final rest. So, as you slowly make your way back towards the surface, toward the warmth and light of the world above, let the profound silence and ancient echoes of the catacombs gently settle over you. Feel the lingering coolness on your skin, the faint, earthy scent in the air. Allow the images of countless loculi, faded frescoes, and winding passages to fade softly in your mind. Like distant memories, the sounds of the modern world will slowly return. A distant car, the chirping of a bird, the murmur of voices, but the quiet, deep resonance of the catacombs will linger, a gentle reminder of the eternal stories held within the earth. Let your thoughts drift, soft and slow, like motes of dust dancing in a single shaft of light. As you ease gently into the quiet stillness of the night,